Millionaire's mother begs, "I can't swim." Son appears furious and does this to his wife. The morning rose like so many others in San Miguel de las Aves, clear, calm, too beautiful to be honest. The kind of beauty that hides cracks. Houses surrounded by high walls, immaculate gardens and well-kept secrets. At the Vasconcelos mansion, the silence weighed heavier than the air. No sound of footsteps, no warning. Only the discreet sound of water in the pool, still as a deep mirror. Doña Mercedes walked slowly along the light stone edge. The sun hadn't yet warmed the ground, but she felt a strange heat rising through her feet. Something in her body warned her. Danger. But danger sometimes disguises itself with expensive perfume and a sweet voice. Behind her, almost without casting a shadow, Camilla watched. Nothing on her face betrayed urgency. There was no rush in her gestures, no hesitation in her bare feet. Only that gaze, polished too much, fixed on her mother-in-law's fragile back. The distance between them was minimal. One step, maybe two. Camilla's hand moved, slowly, like someone adjusting a costume detail in a play. It wasn't an affectionate gesture, nor one of help. It was calculation. When Mercedes felt the touch on her shoulder, she knew. It wasn't the world spinning. It was someone trying to push her into it. For an instant, time stopped. The water there. The body almost defeated by the impulse. And then, the scream. A voice cutting through the breeze, tearing the lie. The maid, Josefa, had appeared from the side corridor, the wet floor cloth still in her hands. The shock froze their bodies for a second. Camilla's hand pulled back. The smile appeared just as quickly. An empty smile from someone improvising a lie with frightening ease. Mercedes didn't fall, but something inside her did. Josefa ran to her employer, touched her arm gently, her gaze steady. Mercedes was still trembling. Camilla had already crouched down, pretending concern. A small tragedy perfectly performed, and with no witnesses daring to contradict her. A few minutes later, the sound of the automatic gate announced Renato's arrival. The silver car slid into the driveway. He stepped out in a hurry, phone in hand, voice raised solving company matters, until Josefa's expression made him stop. She only pointed discreetly toward the house. Inside, Mercedes was already seated, wrapped in a shawl. The room smelled of flowers and tension. Camilla spoke softly, as if nothing serious had happened. "A slip," she explained. The edge was slippery. Things of old age. Renato tried to hide his unease. His instinct told him something, but he ignored it, as he always did when faced with discomfort involving the two most important women in his life. At dinner, the atmosphere was like cracked porcelain. Everything seemed in place, but you only had to look closely to see the fractured lines on the surface. Camilla ruled the table with a light presence and gentle voice. Mercedes ate little. Josefa, in silence, watched every gesture. Everything was clean, organized, harmonious, like a set built to hide the crime that hadn't happened yet. But it was on its way. Later, alone in her room, Mercedes lay awake. The room's silence wasn't peace, it was watchfulness. She relived the morning's moment with a tight heart. There were no doubts, not anymore. Camilla had tried to kill her. The idea had seemed absurd until a few weeks ago. Now, no. It was clear, solid, real. And even so, Mercedes had hesitated to tell the truth. Not out of cowardice nor weakness, but for something deeper, fear of what it might awaken in her son. Fear of looking into Renato's eyes and seeing him. Doubt. There was a bond between mother and son, built over decades of respect. But Camilla had entered like a strange perfume in the house, sweet, penetrating, hard to identify at first, but impossible to ignore once it took over the rooms. And she had taken over. Camilla was presence. She was control disguised as efficiency. She was affection that sounded like an order, and Mercedes, little by little, had been pushed to the edges of her own home. First, the changed schedules, the forgotten appointments, the medicines moved from their place. Then the chair on the porch removed by accident, the tea with a strange taste, the step on the staircase, once lit, now always dark. Nothing screamed danger, everything whispered it. But today, for the first time, the whisper became a touch, and the touch almost death. In the middle of the night, Mercedes rose and walked to the window. The pool gleamed under the light of the street lamps. Treacherous stillness, a mirror of silence. Outside, everything seemed motionless. But inside the house, someone moved like an invisible poison. She thought of Renato, thought of how he always saw Camilla with enchanted eyes, and she felt a pain greater than any physical threat. A pain that didn't come from the body. It came from the certainty that if she died, it wouldn't be by accident. And if she lived, she could no longer keep silent. Mercedes pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She knew what was coming next. The problem was no longer surviving the fall. It was surviving the day after. Before the mansion, before the crystal glasses and the garden with imported rose bushes, there was a simple corner house. Wooden floors that creaked at dawn, books piled up on the table, and the permanent smell of strong coffee in the air. It was there, among chalk dust and pages corrected with a red pen, that Mercedes built the foundation of what her life would become. Not with luxury, with values. She taught at the local public school with a rigor that bordered on tenderness. Her students feared her a little, but they learned, and later they thanked her. She was the kind of woman who knew the difference between strictness and justice, and never confused one for the other. Augusto, her husband, was not a man of many words, a serious accountant, the kind who double-checks change even in banks. He had large hands, restrained gestures, and a calm that seemed unshakable. He never raised his voice, he never failed to come home. Together they weren't happy like in romance novels. They were happy the way people are in real life, with struggles, respect, and small joys. They loved each other in silence, like those who plant something for the future without demanding immediate flowers. Their son, Renato, grew up among accounting books and dictionaries. He wasn't spoiled, he was listened to. At every stumble, there was a firm look that said, "Get up," and he did. Augusto's small business, a modest tax consultancy, was enough for years, but Renato wanted more. He was restless, too smart to settle for the predictable. It was in college, studying engineering, that he discovered his passion for technology. He spent entire nights studying code, while his father slept with the bills neatly filed in a blue folder. And when Augusto fell ill, silently as he did everything, Renato was already drawing the first plans to turn that old office into something bigger. His father's death was quick, quiet. A sudden heart attack at 62. Mercedes didn't cry in front of others. She cried alone in the bathroom, crouched down like a child. Then she wiped her face, dressed in black, and moved on. Because that's what you did. Renato insisted that she move into the new house, the mansion. He said she deserved comfort, rest, and she, out of love and also out of exhaustion, accepted. That's how the roots changed soil. The mansion was beautiful, but it wasn't hers. Mercedes knew it. She walked through the hallways as if walking inside someone else's dream. Josefa, the maid who had followed her from the old house, felt the change too. Nothing was said, but everything had changed. Routine eventually found its shape. Mercedes occupied one of the upstairs rooms, read in the sunlight during the mornings, and cared for her plants in the small indoor garden. She had space, but missed the old noises, the floorboards creaking, the neighbor's dog barking, the school bell ringing. It was during this time that Camilla appeared. She showed up one night at a charity gala. A dress too elegant for the occasion, a trained smile, and a confidence that didn't come from youth, but from strategy. Mercedes knew in that instant she would be trouble. Renato, of course, saw none of that. He saw beauty, charm, a woman who treated him as if every word he said mattered. And he, tired of shallow relationships and nights with half-empty glasses, gave in quickly, too quickly. Dating became marriage in a few months. Camilla entered the family like a new perfume. Intense, impossible to ignore. She took over the rooms, reorganized the house, reprogrammed the routine, always with kindness, always with good reasons. Little by little, Mercedes was pushed to the margins. First came the discreet changes, tea replaced by capsules, her morning walk rescheduled because of concern over the strong sun. Then the looks, those long pauses between one sentence and another, empty smiles. Camilla was never openly cruel. She was too refined for that. Her cruelty came in small gestures, almost invisible. And yet Mercedes felt it, like a crack forming beneath her feet. Josefa noticed too, with her watchful eyes and the patience only humble souls possess. She knew something was twisting inside that new house, but she also knew Mercedes was not a woman to accuse without proof. What no one imagined, not even Mercedes, was what lay behind Camilla's constant presence. The discovery came on an ordinary day. A folder had fallen to the floor in Renato's office. Papers revealed that 60% of the technology company, now valued in the millions, was still in Mercedes's name. Not by mistake, by her son's choice to guarantee his mother's security. But Camilla saw that as an obstacle, and obstacles, to her, didn't exist. There were only pieces out of place, ready to be removed. From then on, affection turned into vigilance. Compliments became veiled demands, and Mercedes, even in her clarity of mind, began to feel lost inside her own routine, as if someone were rearranging the pieces of her life while she slept. Little by little, the accidents began. Small, subtle ones, rugs slightly out of place, medicine bottles with switched labels, a dimly lit step, a glass of juice with an odd taste. Mercedes began to take notes in secret. Small slips of paper hidden inside books, dates, details. She felt something bigger was forming, but it had no shape yet, only presence. One afternoon, as she watched the garden through the window, Josefa approached. Nothing was said, but Mercedes felt she wasn't alone. The roots of that family had changed soil, yes, but some, the oldest ones, still knew how to withstand time and pests. Because certain women never forget what they once were, and never lose their instinct for what threatens what they love. The house was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, that weighs. There were days when Mercedes caught herself staring at her own reflection in the mirror, trying to remember if she had taken her heart medication. The bottle was always on the nightstand, but the color of the pills had changed, and the taste, once bitter, now strange. Camilla said the doctor had switched it, a new formula, more modern, more efficient. Mercedes didn't question it, but she took notes. In a notebook hidden among her cookbooks, she began recording dates, symptoms, words spoken with too much sweetness, little episodes, like the day she tripped on the living room rug, a rug that shouldn't have been there. Or the moment when her vision went dark after the glass of orange juice, made lovingly by Camilla, just the way you like it. The traps didn't come in the form of a scream. They came on a tray. They were disguised as care. Cruelty always comes wrapped in affection. Mercedes wasn't sure of everything anymore, but she knew enough. Camilla was testing boundaries. Josefa saw it all, with the eyes of someone who had worked in many homes, but stayed in only one. She knew the smells of the kitchen, the creaks of the hinges, the subtle mood shifts among the residents. When Mercedes stopped talking so much, she understood. When her employer stopped tending the garden, she was certain. Camilla was gaining territory, slowly, like an elegant virus. It was Josefa who went to see Dr. Esteban. The family lawyer, retired from big cases but still loyal to Mercedes, listened carefully. He didn't doubt. He only asked for discretion. They set up a simple plan. Observe, record, document. No confrontation. Not yet. Camilla, meanwhile, seemed increasingly comfortable in her role as the devoted wife. She managed her husband's appointments, scheduled meetings, controlled hours, smiles, and silences. Her presence was impeccable, not a word out of place, no explicit display of hostility. But Mercedes could feel it. The danger was in the details. When she sat on the veranda sofa, she'd find her glasses swapped, one lens weaker, blurring the world. When she asked for tea, it was always too hot. When she tried to turn on the television, the remote would vanish. Everything seemed like a mistake, but too many mistakes to be coincidence. One day, as she went down the stairs, she felt her body tilt forward. A sudden imbalance, almost imperceptible, if not for Josefa's hand, already waiting at the bottom step, holding her firmly. It was the first day Mercedes said, in a low voice, "She wants to erase me." Josefa just nodded, calmly, without alarm, like someone who already knows what must be done. Meanwhile, Camila was discovering things. While cleaning Renato's office, she found an old folder. Inside, documents that should never have fallen into the wrong hands, spreadsheets, contracts, and one crucial piece of information. 60% of Vasconcelos' technology was still under Mrs. Mercedes's name. The fortune, after all, wasn't just the husband's. Camilla read and reread the contents, her eyes fixed, unblinking. She felt something rise inside her, a mixture of anger, surprise, and urgency. Mercedes wasn't just a nuisance, she was the obstacle. The old woman wasn't fragile, she was the owner. From then on, the game changed intensity. Patience became strategy, kindness a shield. Camila began probing Renato, casual questions strategically placed. Hints about the company's future, about succession, about how it would be more practical if everything were in his name. After all, he was the one working so hard. Renato listened, but didn't absorb. Raised by a woman like Mercedes, there was in him a sense of justice even love couldn't erase, and that infuriated her. Josefa, alert, discreetly installed a hidden camera in the kitchen. Another in the upstairs hallway. Esteban helped organize the documentation. A neighbor, a retired nurse, began analyzing the swapped capsules. In silence, in secret. Camilla suspected nothing, still believed in total control, and because of that, she allowed herself to take risks. On a hot afternoon, Mercedes found the staircase without its rug, the handrail loose, the light bulb burned out. Camilla waited at the top, smiling. Nothing happened, but the message was clear. Time moved like dragging stones. From the outside, the mansion remained impeccable. Inside, it was a minefield. Mercedes no longer slept peacefully. She kept a light on, locked her door, hid notes in her pockets. She feared forgetting, feared even more not being heard. Renato, consumed by work, sensed the tension but couldn't tell where it came from. When he asked, he got evasive answers. A "just tired," a "must be my age." Nothing explicit. Camilla was careful. She left no trace. But each of her steps left an invisible mark, which Mercedes collected like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Josefa gathered them patiently, and Esteban, on the other end, assembled the dossier. Everything was moving toward a breaking point. Camilla didn't know she was being watched, and a woman who lives on disguises is only dangerous as long as no one sees her completely. On a windless night, Mercedes sat in the armchair of her bedroom with the old photo album. Augusto, little Renato, the old house, the shade of childhood trees, the roots, the real ones. Outside, Camilla descended the glass staircase in silence, barefoot, a glass in her hand. Inside the house, something was moving, unseen. A plan was being drawn, a counterplan too. And between the two, the truth waited for its moment to explode. The mansion woke up smelling of fresh flowers. Camilla had ordered new arrangements for the hall, white roses, lilies, everything perfect, always perfect. Mercedes sensed the perfume before she even went downstairs. It was too sweet, almost suffocating, like everything in that house now. The routine followed its usual precision. Camilla prepared breakfast. Josefa served in silence. Renato had already left, as he did every Tuesday for his meeting with the partners. But that Tuesday, he would return early. Mercedes didn't know that. Camila, even less. Josefa, yes. By noon, the house was strangely quiet. The harsh sunlight cast sharp shadows across the marble floor. Mercedes was reading in the inner garden, though her eyes no longer followed the lines. She could feel something forming in the air, an invisible tension, a threat taking shape little by little, like a dark cloud on the horizon. Camila appeared behind her, calm, dressed in white. She carried a tray with juice and medicine. Mercedes didn't touch it. Her daughter-in-law's voice was low, controlled. She said the older woman needed to rest, that the heat was too much, that it would be best to go upstairs, lie down, take the pill. That's all. Mercedes stayed silent, but her feet were planted firmly, her eyes alert. She stood up, slowly, but with resolve. Camila followed closely, hands free, eyes serene, the same performance. They went up the stairs. That's where it began. The curve of the handrail had been loose for days, a screw slightly undone, apparently by accident. Josefa had already photographed it. Esteban had the receipt for the purchase, made by Camila under the guise of maintenance. Mercedes knew, and even so, she climbed. At the top of the stairs, the house seemed suspended in time. The silence was absolute. No cars passing, no birds, not even wind. Camila stood behind her, exactly where she had been days earlier, by the edge of the pool. The same distance, the same gaze. Mercedes took a deep breath, felt the air catch in her chest. And then came the touch, not a violent shove, but firm, disguised, pretending to be assistance. It was the second push, but this time she was ready. Mercedes's hand gripped the handrail tightly. The screw gave slightly, but not enough. Her body didn't fall. Her balance wavered, but held. And at that exact moment, as Camila feigned shock and reached out to help, a voice came from behind them. "What are you doing?" "Renato." Camila turned as if struck by a blade. Her husband stood there in the middle of the room, tie undone, eyes wide. He had come home early, unannounced, just as arranged with Josefa. He had seen it, seen the gesture, his mother's body at the edge of the void, his wife's hand, not saving, pushing. The scene froze. Camila stepped back, tried to smile, tried to speak, but no words came. Mercedes descended the 2 steps back down, firm, though her legs trembled. She stopped beside her son. Her gaze now was stone. Camila stammered some excuse, something about dizziness, confusion, misunderstanding. But the act no longer worked. Renato said nothing. The front door opened. Esteban entered, accompanied by a local police officer and 2 security guards from the condominium. Josefa followed, carrying a folder. Camila turned pale. There were the records, photos, reports, recordings, samples of the altered capsules, the lab report, the damaged staircase, the handrail, the misplaced rug, the tea laced with sedatives, everything. No scandal, no shouting, only evidence. Camila looked around as if searching for an escape. The mask on her face slipped away little by little. Desperation began in her eyes. Then came her voice, trembling, denying everything. Then her body, shaking, frantic, denial turning into rage. She screamed. Renato didn't answer. She tried to approach him. Josefa stepped forward, blocking her. Camila collapsed to her knees on the cold marble floor. Her breath ragged, hair falling from its perfect bun. There was no audience now, no script. Renato turned his face away, not out of hate, out of disappointment, out of grief, the kind of grief that doesn't come from death, but from betrayal. Camila was taken away without resistance. The mansion fell silent. Hours later in the twilight, Mercedes sat in the living room armchair, the windows open, the air lighter. Renato approached slowly. He said nothing, sat beside his mother, eyes on the floor. She ran her hand through his hair the way she used to when he was a boy. Then he spoke. Only 2 words. "Forgive me." Mercedes didn't reply. She just touched his hand. The forgiveness was already there. It didn't need to be spoken. Josefa watched from the kitchen, her apron clean, hands folded. For the first time in a long while, there was peace. The house didn't need imported flowers or perfect silences. It only needed truth. And the truth had finally come back to live there. How many Camillas have you seen hiding behind a smile? Tell me in the comments. Just one word is enough. If this story touched you, leave a like and subscribe. That's how we keep giving voice to what so many people keep quiet.